I never thought I would become the kind of person who could close a door in her own parents' faces. But then again, I never thought they would choose a party over their granddaughter's life. The memory still burned like acid in my chest. 7 years had passed since I stood in that hospital corridor, phone pressed to my ear, begging my mother for help. 7 years since I heard her say the words that shattered whatever remained of our family bonds. 7 years since I buried my 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, in a cemetery plot I could barely afford. I was 27 now, living in Austin, Texas, in a modest apartment that smelled like coffee and old books. The February morning was unusually cold, and I wrapped my cardigan tighter as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the financial reports spread before me. Numbers had become my refuge, my weapon, my path to something resembling peace. After Sophia died, I threw myself into accounting work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Every spreadsheet was a distraction. Every balanced ledger was proof that I could still control something in this world. My phone buzzed. A text from my former college roommate, Jessica. "Saw your parents at the country club yesterday. They asked about you. Told them you were doing great. Hope that's okay." I set the phone down without responding. Jessica meant well, but she did not understand. Nobody did. How could they? Most people could not fathom parents who would refuse to help save their grandchild's life because the amount was unreasonable and the prognosis was uncertain, yet somehow find it perfectly reasonable to spend nearly 3 times that amount on a debutante ball for their younger daughter. My younger sister, Celeste, had been 17 when Sophia was dying. She had been excited about her upcoming debutante season, chattering endlessly about dresses and dance lessons whenever she bothered to visit me. I did not blame Celeste, not really. She had been a child, sheltered and spoiled, with no concept of real consequences. But my parents were different. They were adults who made a choice. They looked at their dying granddaughter and saw a bad investment. They looked at their youngest daughter's social debut and saw something worth preserving. The specialists had been clear. Sophia needed an experimental treatment not covered by insurance. The cost was $74,000. Without it, she had months to live. With it, she had a fighting chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. That was all I had asked for. A chance. I remembered my father's voice on the phone, measured and reasonable, explaining why they could not help. "Layla, we have to be practical. The doctor said the treatment might not even work. That is a tremendous amount of money to spend on something so uncertain. We have other obligations, other considerations. Celeste's debut is important for her future, for her opportunities. You have to understand, we are not made of money." $210,000. That was what they eventually spent on Celeste's debutante ball 8 months after Sophia died. I knew the exact figure because my mother had complained about the costs in an email, somehow expecting sympathy. The email had included an itemized breakdown. The country club venue, the custom gown from a designer in New York, the catering for 300 guests, the orchestra, the flowers, the photographer, the crystal party favors. Every line item was a knife in my chest. I had not spoken to my parents since that email arrived. I blocked their numbers, returned their letters unopened, refused their attempts at reconciliation through mutual acquaintances. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. The morning light shifted, casting long shadows across my kitchen. I returned my attention to the financial reports before me. I worked as a senior accountant for a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company now, a job I had fought hard to obtain. After Sophia died, I spent 2 years barely functioning, working retail jobs and drowning in grief and debt. But I had clawed my way up, taking night classes, earning additional certifications, building a reputation for thoroughness and discretion. My current project was particularly complex. The company was preparing for an audit, and I had discovered several irregularities in the records dating back 3 years. Nothing criminal, just sloppy bookkeeping from my predecessor. Fixing it required painstaking attention to detail, cross-referencing hundreds of transactions, rebuilding a coherent financial narrative from fragments of data. It was exactly the kind of work I excelled at, finding patterns, uncovering truth, making order from chaos. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my supervisor, Kenneth, asking if I could come to the office early to discuss the audit preparation. I texted back confirming I would be there within an hour, then gathered my materials and prepared to leave. As I locked my apartment door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked older than 27. There were permanent shadows under my eyes, and my dark hair, which I wore in a simple ponytail, had started showing gray at the temples. I had lost weight I could not afford to lose, and my clothes hung loosely on my frame. But my eyes were sharp, alert, calculating. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to survive. The drive to the office took 30 minutes through morning traffic. I used the time to mentally prepare for the day ahead, running through the audit checklist, anticipating questions, planning responses. Control and preparation had become my mantras. If I could not control what had happened to Sophia, I could at least control everything else. The pharmaceutical distribution company where I worked occupied a modern glass building on the outskirts of Austin. It was not glamorous work, but it was stable and well-paying, and it kept my mind occupied. Kenneth was already in the conference room when I arrived, along with 2 external auditors I had not met before. "Layla, thank you for coming early," Kenneth said, gesturing to a chair. "These are the auditors from the Regulatory Oversight Board. They have some questions about the discrepancies you flagged in your preliminary report." I spent the next 3 hours walking them through the financial irregularities, explaining the pattern of errors, demonstrating how I had traced each transaction back to its source. The auditors were impressed with my work, complimenting my thoroughness. Kenneth looked relieved. By the time the meeting concluded, I felt the familiar satisfaction of a job done well. It was a small victory, but I had learned to appreciate small victories. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and ate a sandwich I had brought from home. Money was still tight, even with my better salary. I was slowly paying down the medical debt from Sophia's illness, chipping away at a mountain that seemed to grow no matter how much I paid. The hospital bills, the funeral costs, the credit cards I had maxed out trying to find any possible way to save her, all of it still haunted me. My phone rang, an unknown number with an Austin area code. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. "Is this Layla?" The voice was female, older, tentative. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Diane. I am a friend of your mother's. She asked me to reach out to you." I should have hung up immediately. Instead, I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. "Tell my mother I have nothing to say to her. Please, just listen for a moment. Your parents are desperate to reconnect with you. They miss you terribly. Your father has not been well, and your mother thinks the estrangement is making things worse. They want to make amends." "Make amends?" My voice was flat, emotionless. "Did my mother explain to you why we are estranged?" A pause. "She said there was a family tragedy, and that you blame them for it." "I do not blame them for Sophia dying. I blame them for choosing not to help when they could have. I blame them for deciding that a party was more important than their granddaughter's life. Those are facts, not feelings." "Layla, I know you are hurt. You know nothing. Tell my mother that if she wants to communicate with me, she can do it directly. And tell her the answer will be no." I ended the call and sat in silence, my hands shaking. The grief never fully went away. It lived inside me like a second heartbeat, steady and permanent. Some days I could push it down and function. Other days it rose up and threatened to drown me. Today was becoming one of the drowning days. When I returned to the office, I forced myself to focus on work. I reviewed contracts, updated spreadsheets, responded to emails. The routine was soothing. At 6 p.m, as I was preparing to leave, Kenneth stopped by my desk. "Layla, I wanted to thank you again for your work on the audit prep. The board was very impressed. There is a possibility of a promotion coming up in the next quarter, and I think you would be an excellent candidate. A promotion. More money, more responsibility, more control. Exactly what I needed. Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate that. He nodded and left. I gathered my things and headed home, feeling a small spark of something that might have been hope. Maybe I was building towards something. Maybe there was a future beyond grief and survival. That evening, I made dinner. Pasta with vegetables, simple and cheap, and sat on my small balcony watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and purple, and for a moment I allowed myself to think about Sophia. She would have been 9 now, old enough for school, for friends, for dreams of her own. I wondered what she would have looked like, what she would have loved, who she would have become. The grief rose up, sharp and familiar. I let it come, let it wash over me. After all these years, I had learned that fighting it only made it worse. Better to acknowledge it, to sit with it, to let it pass like a wave. My phone buzzed. Another text from Jessica. Your sister Celeste is getting married in June. Big wedding planned. I thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time. Celeste was getting married. Of course she was. Her life had moved forward, untouched by tragedy, cushioned by privilege and parental investment. She probably had not thought about Sophia in years. Why would she? The dead were easy to forget when you were busy living. I deleted the message without responding. Celeste's wedding was none of my concern. I had my own life to manage, my own path to follow. Whatever guilt or obligation I might have once felt toward my family had died along with my daughter. But as I lay in bed that night, sleep eluding me, I could not stop thinking about my parents. They wanted to make amends. They missed me. They thought they could simply reach out and everything would be forgiven. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. They had taught me a valuable lesson 7 years ago. Family was not defined by blood, but by action. They had shown me exactly what I meant to them, and I had learned the lesson well. March arrived with unseasonable warmth. Austin bloomed early that year, the city exploding with wildflowers and the relentless optimism of spring. I barely noticed. My days followed the same routine: work, home, sleep, repeat. It was a small life, but it was mine, and I had built it from nothing. The promotion Kenneth had mentioned became official in mid-March. I was named senior audit manager, with a salary increase and a small team reporting to me. It was a significant step up, and I threw myself into the new responsibilities with the same intensity I brought to everything. My team consisted of 3 younger accountants, all eager and competent. I trained them thoroughly, insisting on precision and documentation for every transaction. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a complex pharmaceutical supply chain analysis, my assistant knocked on my office door. There are 2 people here to see you. They do not have an appointment, but they say they are your parents. My blood turned to ice. Tell them I am unavailable. I did. They said they would wait as long as necessary. I stood up, fury coursing through me. The audacity of showing up at my workplace was stunning. They had no boundaries, no respect, no understanding of what they had done. Tell security to escort them out of the building. If they refuse to leave, call the police. My assistant looked uncomfortable but nodded. She left, and I sat down, trying to control my shaking hands. They could not just appear in my life and expect access. They had forfeited that right. They had chosen Celeste's party over Sophia's life, and now they would live with the consequences. 20 minutes later, my assistant returned. They left, but your mother left this envelope for you. I took the envelope without comment and set it aside. I did not open it that day or the next. It sat on my desk like a small bomb, contained but dangerous. Finally, after a week, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it during my lunch break, when I knew I would be alone. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, several pages long. Her handwriting was shaky, less elegant than I remembered. I began reading despite myself. My dearest Layla, I do not know how to begin this letter except to say that I am sorry. Your father and I are sorry. We have carried the weight of our decision for 7 years, and it has nearly destroyed us. Not a day goes by that we do not think about Sophia, about what we could have done differently, about the choice we made. We were wrong. We were selfish and short-sighted and cruel. We told ourselves that we were being practical, that we were protecting the family's resources, that the medical prognosis was too uncertain to justify such an expense. But the truth is, we were scared. Scared of losing everything, scared of being vulnerable, scared of admitting that we could not fix everything. And in our fear, we made the worst possible choice. We lost you, and we lost Sophia, and we have spent every day since living with that loss. The letter went on for pages, detailing their regrets, their attempts to process their guilt, their declining health and strained marriage. My father, apparently, had suffered a minor stroke the previous year. My mother had developed anxiety so severe she rarely left the house. Celeste, now 24, was planning her wedding and wanted me there. But my parents had not told her about our estrangement. They had maintained the fiction that I was simply busy with work, too overwhelmed to visit. The lies they told to preserve appearances were almost as offensive as the original betrayal. The letter concluded with a plea. We do not expect forgiveness. We do not deserve it. But we are begging you to allow us back into your life, even in the smallest way. We are your parents, and we love you, and we cannot bear this separation any longer. Please, Layla, please give us a chance to show you that we have changed, that we understand what we did, that we can do better. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. My hands were steady now, my mind clear. They were sorry. They regretted their choice. They wanted another chance. And none of it mattered. Sorry did not bring Sophia back. Regret did not erase 7 years of silence. Guilt did not pay the medical bills that still followed me. They wanted absolution, but I had none to give. They had shown me who they were in my darkest moment, and I believed them. I threw the letter in the trash and returned to work. That evening, I met Jessica for coffee at a small cafe near my apartment. She had been persistent about getting together, and I finally agreed, mostly to stop her from texting me every other day. Jessica was one of the few people from my old life who had remained in contact, and even that relationship was strained. You look good, Jessica said as we sat down with our drinks. The promotion must be treating you well. It keeps me busy. Too busy for your family? She said it casually, but I caught the edge in her voice. Jessica, if you invited me here to lecture me about my parents, we can end this now. She held up her hands. I am not lecturing. I am just saying that life is short and grudges are exhausting. Your parents made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. What they did was a choice. Fine, a choice. A terrible choice. But people can change. They can grow. I took a long sip of coffee, considering my words. When Sophia was dying, I called everyone I knew begging for help. I started a fundraising campaign online that raised less than $8,000. I sold everything I owned. I begged the hospital for payment plans, for charity care, for anything. And through all of that, my parents knew what was happening. They knew I was desperate, and they chose to save their money for a party instead. That was not a moment of weakness or poor judgment. That was a revelation of character. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Your sister wants you at her wedding. Celeste can want whatever she likes. I have no interest in celebrating with a family that let my daughter die. Celeste was not responsible for what your parents did. No, but she benefited from it. She got her expensive debut, her privileged life, her fairy tale wedding, all subsidized by Sophia's death. Jessica looked uncomfortable. That is not fair. Fair? I laughed, a harsh sound. Nothing about this is fair, but it is honest. We finished our coffee in awkward silence. As we were leaving, Jessica touched my arm. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. I just hope someday you find a way to let go of some of that anger, for your own sake. It is eating you alive. I did not respond. What could I say? The anger was all I had left. It kept me moving forward, kept me working, kept me from collapsing under the weight of everything I had lost. Without it, I was not sure what would remain. April brought unexpected complications. My father had another stroke, more severe this time, and was hospitalized. I learned this not from my parents, but from a distant cousin who called me out of the blue, assuming I already knew. The cousin, Patricia, was sympathetic, but confused by my lack of response. Are you planning to visit him? She asked. Your mother is beside herself. She needs family support right now. She has Celeste, I said simply. Celeste is busy with wedding planning. Your mother specifically asked for you. I felt nothing. No guilt, no concern, no flicker of familial obligation. 7 years ago, my daughter had been dying, and I had needed them. They had chosen otherwise. Now the situation was reversed, and they expected different rules to apply. The hypocrisy was staggering. I am sorry my father is ill, but I cannot help, I said, and ended the call. But the news bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I cared about my father's health, but because it disrupted the careful emotional distance I had maintained. My parents had been abstract concepts for years, villains in a story I told myself to make sense of my pain. Now, they were real people again, aging and vulnerable, and that made everything more complicated. I tried to focus on work, but my concentration was fractured. During a team meeting, I snapped at one of my junior accountants for a minor error, then had to apologize. Kenneth noticed my distraction and pulled me aside. Everything okay? You seem off lately. Family issues, I said vaguely. He nodded sympathetically. Take some time if you need it. You have plenty of leave saved up. But time off was the last thing I wanted. Work was my anchor, my distraction, my proof that I was still functional. Without it, I would have nothing but memories and grief, and the growing realization that my revenge, my years of silence and rejection, had not brought me any peace. That weekend, I did something I had not done in months. I drove to the cemetery where Sophia was buried. It was a small, modest place on the eastern edge of Austin, with rows of simple headstones and ancient oak trees providing shade. Sophia's grave was in a far corner, marked by a small granite stone with her name and dates. Sophia Grace. Born March 12th. Died September 7th. I sat on the grass beside her grave and tried to remember her face. 7 years had blurred the details. I could recall impressions. Her dark curls, her laugh, the way she clutched her stuffed rabbit. But the specifics had faded. I had photographs, of course, but they felt increasingly like pictures of someone else's child, someone else's life. I do not know what to do, I said aloud to the stone. They want back in, and I want them to suffer. But nothing I do makes me feel better. I thought keeping them out would be enough, but it is not. The stone offered no answers. The wind rustled the oak leaves. A bird sang somewhere nearby. Life continued, indifferent to grief and anger and the impossible weight of loss. I stayed until the sun began to set, then drove home in silence. That night, I made a decision. I would not reconcile with my parents. I would not forgive them, but I would find a way to make them understand, truly understand, what their choice had cost. Not just me, but them. They wanted absolution, but I would give them clarity instead. The next morning, I began researching. I wanted to know everything about my parents' current situation, their finances, their health, their social standing, their vulnerabilities. It was not difficult. My father had been a commercial real estate developer, moderately successful, well-connected in Dallas society. But the stroke had forced his retirement, and I discovered through public records that his company had been sold 2 years ago. The sale price was substantial, but not as much as I had expected. Medical bills from the first stroke had likely eaten into their savings. My mother had never worked outside the home. Her entire identity had been built around social status and maintaining appearances. I found her name on several charity board listings, but she had resigned from most of them over the past year. The anxiety issues mentioned in her letter were apparently serious enough to limit her activities. And then there was Celeste. Her wedding was scheduled for mid-June at an exclusive venue in Dallas. The guest list was supposedly over 400 people. I found the wedding website, complete with registry and photos of the happy couple. Celeste's fiancé was named Julian, a finance professional with a polished smile and impressive credentials. They looked perfect together, like models in a bridal magazine. The registry told me everything I needed to know about their financial situation. Luxury items, expensive china, a honeymoon fund requesting contributions for a month-long European tour. My parents were clearly funding much of this, just as they had funded the debutante ball. Old habits died hard. An idea began forming. It was petty and cruel and exactly what they deserved. I spent the next week refining the plan, working through the details, anticipating obstacles. The beauty of it was its simplicity. I would not need to lie or manipulate. I would only need to tell the truth at the right moment, to the right people, in the right way. By the end of April, my father was home from the hospital, recovering slowly. Patricia called me again with updates I had not requested. He had limited mobility now, required a walker, spoke with a slight slur. My mother was his primary caregiver, overwhelmed and exhausted. Celeste visited when she could, but she was consumed with wedding preparations. "Your parents are asking about you constantly," Patricia said. "It would mean so much if you would just visit, even for an hour." "No," I said firmly. "I understand this is difficult for you to comprehend, Patricia, but my answer is final. Please stop calling me about this." She made a sound of frustration. "You are being incredibly selfish, Layla. Whatever happened between you and your parents, surely it is not worth this level of cruelty. They are suffering. They made choices that led to suffering. Those consequences belong to them. You sound like you hate them." I considered this. "No, I do not hate them. Hate requires emotional investment. I simply do not consider them family anymore." Patricia hung up on me. I did not blame her. To someone outside the situation, I probably did seem cruel and unforgiving. But Patricia had not watched her child die while her parents counted their money and planned parties. She had not lived through that particular hell, and therefore her opinion was irrelevant. In early May, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. I had just gotten home from work when there was a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with dark hair and familiar features. Celeste. I opened the door but did not invite her in. "What are you doing here?" She looked nervous, younger than her 24 years. "I need to talk to you. Please, Layla. Just a few minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. My apartment was small and sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the luxury she had grown up with. She looked around with barely concealed surprise, probably wondering how her sister had ended up living like this. "How did you find my address?" I asked. "I hired someone, a private investigator. I needed to see you." I folded my arms across my chest. "Why?" "Because you are my sister, and I miss you. and I am getting married in 6 weeks, and I want you there." The words came out in a rush. "I know you are angry at Mom and Dad. I know something happened years ago that made you cut them off. But whatever it was, surely we can move past it. You are my only sister. I want you at my wedding." I stared at Celeste, this stranger wearing my sister's face. 7 years had changed her from a selfish teenager into a poised young woman, but the fundamental disconnect remained. She had no idea what had happened. My parents had never told her the truth. "What did they tell you about why I stopped speaking to them?" I asked. She shifted uncomfortably. "They said you were going through a difficult time after your daughter passed away, that you needed space to grieve, and blamed them unfairly for not being able to help more. Mom said you were angry because they could not drop everything to support you financially, that they had other obligations." The rage that rose in me was cold and clarifying. Of course they had lied. Of course they had reframed their monstrous choice as reasonable boundary setting. They had protected their image, even to their own daughter. "Sit down," I said. "If you want to understand why I will never attend your wedding or speak to our parents again, I will tell you the truth. But once I tell you, you cannot unhear it." Celeste sat on my threadbare couch, her designer handbag clutched in her lap. I remained standing, needing the physical advantage. When Sophia was 2 years old, she was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder. The doctors said she had maybe 6 months without treatment. There was an experimental therapy available that could potentially save her life, or at least extend it significantly. The treatment cost $74,000 and was not covered by insurance. I was 20 years old, working as a waitress, drowning in bills. I had no way to raise that kind of money on my own. Celeste's eyes widened. "I remember you were struggling. Mom mentioned it once or twice. I called our parents and begged them for help. I explained the situation, sent them all the medical documentation, showed them the payment plans I had tried to arrange with the hospital. I asked them to loan me the money, promised I would pay back every cent. Do you know what they said?" She shook her head slowly. "They said it was too much money for something uncertain, that the doctors themselves admitted the treatment might not work, that they had other financial obligations and could not afford to take that risk. They told me no, Celeste. They looked at their dying granddaughter and decided she was not worth the investment." Celeste's face had gone pale. "That cannot be true. They would not—" "Sophia died 8 months before your debutante ball. That ball cost $210,000. I know because Mom sent me an itemized list complaining about the expenses. She expected sympathy. Instead, she showed me exactly what they valued more than their grandchild's life. The silence that followed was absolute. Celeste sat frozen, her knuckles white where she gripped her handbag. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I did not know. They never told me any of this. I thought you were just angry about normal family stuff, that you were being dramatic and holding a grudge over nothing. They lied to you to protect themselves. They have spent 7 years maintaining the fiction that I am the unreasonable one, that I am cruel for cutting them off. But I am not cruel, Celeste. I am simply holding them accountable for their choices." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I would have given you the money. If I had known, if anyone had told me, I would have done something. I was just a kid, but I would have tried. I know. And I did." Celeste had been thoughtless and privileged, but not malicious. She had been a child, protected from ugly truths by parents who preferred comfortable lies. But you were not the one who made the decision. They were. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "What do you want me to do? Tell them I know? Cancel the wedding? I do not understand what you want from me." "I do not want anything from you. You came here looking for answers, and I gave them to you. What you do with that information is your choice." Celeste stood up abruptly, agitated. "This is insane. My whole life has been a lie. Every time they talked about family values, about taking care of each other, about being there for the people we love, all of it was bullshit. They let your baby die so they could throw me a party. Oh my God, oh my God. She was spiraling, hyperventilating. Part of me felt bad for her. This was not her fault. But another part of me, the hard, bitter part that had been forged in grief and betrayal, felt satisfaction. Let her feel a fraction of what I had felt. Let her understand the weight of what our parents had done. Breathe, I said, more gently. Sit down and breathe. She sat, forcing herself to take deep breaths. After a few minutes, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Are you going to do something? To them, I mean. At the wedding or before? I had not planned to. I have no interest in your wedding, Celeste. I was going to let you have your perfect day and continue living my separate life. But if you are asking whether I think they deserve to face consequences for what they did, then yes. Absolutely. Will you help me understand? She asked. I need to process this. I need someone who knows the truth. I hesitated. I had built my life on distance and isolation, on cutting off everyone connected to my old family. Letting Celeste in, even slightly, felt dangerous. But she was a victim of our parents' lies too, in her own way. And there was something appealing about having an ally, however unexpected. I can do that, I said finally. But understand this. I will never have a relationship with our parents again. If you tell them we have spoken, if you try to use this to broker some kind of reconciliation, I will cut you off too. My boundary is non-negotiable. I understand, she said quietly. Can I ask you something? Do you ever forgive people who hurt you? I thought about it. I do not know. No one has ever hurt me as badly as they did, and then actually tried to make amends in a meaningful way. Sorry is easy. Changed behavior is hard. Our parents want forgiveness without change, absolution without accountability. That is not forgiveness. That is just enabling. Celeste nodded slowly. She stayed for another hour, asking questions about Sophia, about those final months, about what my life had been like since. I answered honestly, not sparing the difficult details. By the time she left, we both felt wrung out and exhausted. I do not know what I am going to do about the wedding, she said at the door. Part of me wants to cancel it, to refuse their money, to make them face what they did. But I love Julian, and I want to marry him. And I do not want their sins to ruin my happiness. Then do not let them, I said. Have your wedding. Live your life. You did not make their choices, so do not let those choices destroy you. Just do not ask me to participate in the charade. After Celeste left, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment and tried to process what had happened. I had expected anger when I told her the truth, or denial, or attempts to defend our parents. Instead, she had believed me immediately and responded with horror and guilt. It was disorienting, having someone on my side after years of isolation. Over the next 2 weeks, Celeste and I met 3 more times. She was processing her entire childhood through a new lens, questioning every memory, every family story, every lesson our parents had tried to teach. It was painful to watch, but also necessary. She needed to understand who they really were. During our 4th meeting, at a quiet restaurant far from where our parents might see us, Celeste told me she had confronted them. I asked Mom point blank about Sophia and the money, she said, pushing food around her plate. She tried to deny it at first, then broke down crying and admitted everything. She said they were scared and selfish and wrong, that they have regretted it every day since. Dad just sat there and did not say anything. He looked old and broken, Layla. I have never seen him like that. Good, I said flatly. I told them I knew about the debutante ball costs, about the lies they told me. Mom tried to explain that the situations were different, that the ball was important for my future. I asked her how my future was more important than a baby's life. She did not have an answer. I felt a fierce satisfaction hearing this. My parents had been confronted with their lies, had their comfortable narratives stripped away. It was not enough, but it was something. "What did you tell them about the wedding?" I asked. That I still wanted to get married, but that I could not look at them the same way. That they had destroyed my image of our family, and I needed time to figure out what I believed about them now. Mom begged me not to cancel, said she could not bear losing another daughter. I told her she had not lost me, but she had lost my trust. How did that feel? Awful. Necessary. Like lancing an infected wound. Celeste took a long drink of water. "I have been thinking about what you said, about forgiveness requiring changed behavior. I do not think they can change. They are too invested in seeing themselves as good people who made one bad decision under pressure. They cannot accept that their choice revealed something fundamental about their character." I nodded. This was exactly right. My parents wanted to frame their decision as an aberration, a moment of weakness, rather than accept it as a true reflection of their values. People who genuinely change did not make excuses. They did not minimize. They did not ask their victims to move on for the sake of peace. "Are you going to tell Julian?" I asked. I already did. He was horrified. He wanted to call off the wedding, refuse their money, make them face consequences. But I talked him down. My revenge is not going to be dramatic or public. It is going to be slow and permanent. They can fund my wedding, but it will be the last thing they ever do for me. After this, I am done. No more Sunday dinners, no more holidays, no more pretending we are a happy family. They will get to watch me live my life from a distance, knowing they destroyed any chance of real connection. It was a measured adult response, and I respected it. Celeste was not me. She had not lost a child. Her pain was different. Her path to healing would be different, and she was entitled to handle it in her own way. "I am proud of you," I said, surprising myself, "for facing the truth. That takes courage." "I learned from watching you," she said. "You refused to pretend everything was fine. You held the line even when everyone told you to let it go. That is strength, Layla. I want that kind of strength." We talked for hours that night, sharing memories and wounds and tentative plans for separate futures. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. We were not close exactly, but we were not strangers anymore either. We were two women who had survived the same toxic family and were learning to build lives beyond that damage. In early June, with Celeste's wedding approaching, I made a decision. I would send a gift, not to celebrate the marriage, but to make a point. I commissioned a custom photo book through an online service. It contained pictures of Sophia, from birth through her final days in the hospital. Each page was labeled with dates and simple captions. The first page read, "Sophia Grace, March 12th through September 7th. Beloved daughter, granddaughter, and piece of my heart." The final page contained a single line. "The cost of saving her life, $74,000. The cost of a debutante ball, $210,000. Some choices reveal character." I had it delivered to my parents' house 1 week before the wedding, addressed to both of them. I did not include a note or return address. The book would speak for itself. Celeste called me the day it arrived. Mom opened it at breakfast. She collapsed. Dad had to help her to the couch. They spent the entire morning crying. Mom called me sobbing, asking if I had known about this, if I had helped you send it. I told her I had not, but that I thought it was fair. "How do you feel about it?" I asked. "Honestly, I'm glad you did it. They needed to see Sophia as real, not as an abstract concept they could rationalize away. The photos make it impossible to hide from what they did." The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in mid-June. I did not attend, of course. I spent the day working in my apartment, reviewing financial reports for an upcoming audit. It was peaceful in its own way, this deliberate absence. While my family celebrated with 400 guests, expensive champagne, and orchestral music, I was doing exactly what I wanted, living the life I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. Celeste texted me a single photo from the reception, her and Julian cutting the cake, both of them laughing. She looked genuinely happy. The message that accompanied it read, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I am starting my marriage with honesty, which is more than our parents gave us. I hope you find peace, Layla. You deserve it." I stared at that message for a long time. Peace. What a strange concept. I was not sure I knew what that meant anymore. My life was built on grief and anger and the determined construction of a future that owed nothing to anyone. Was that peace? Or just controlled chaos? July arrived with oppressive heat and an unexpected phone call. It was from a lawyer representing my parents' estate. My father had updated his will and wanted to ensure I received notification of the changes. The lawyer, a man named Gregory with a bland professional voice, explained that my father was still alive, but wanted to handle estate planning while he was competent enough to do so. "Your parents have expressed a desire to leave you a substantial inheritance," Gregory said. "Despite the estrangement, they want to ensure you are provided for. They asked me to reach out and discuss the details with you." I almost laughed. Money. After all these years, after everything they had done, they thought money would fix it. They thought they could buy redemption with an inheritance, could purchase forgiveness from beyond the grave. "I do not want their money," I said clearly. "Please remove me from the will entirely. Leave everything to Celeste or donate it to charity. I want nothing from them." Gregory paused. "Miss Layla, I would encourage you to think carefully about this. The amount in question is significant, potentially over $1 million after the estate is settled. That kind of financial security could change your life. My answer is final. Draw up whatever paperwork is necessary to remove me as a beneficiary. I will sign it and return it within the week." "May I ask why? Most people in your situation would—" "Most people were not in my situation. Remove me from the will, Gregory. That is my only instruction." I hung up and sat in silence. $1 million. The number was almost funny. They had refused to give me $74,000 to save Sophia, but now they wanted to leave me $1 million. It was guilt, masquerading as generosity, an attempt to rewrite history with money they would not even be alive to miss. That evening, I called Celeste and told her about the conversation. She had just returned from her honeymoon, her voice still carrying the lightness of newlywed happiness. "They mentioned the will to me too," she said. "They want to split everything between us. I told them I would not contest your decision, whatever you chose." "I am refusing it. All of it. I figured you would. What do you want me to do with your share?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "If you are removed from the will, everything comes to me. But that does not seem right. Half of it should be yours, even if it does not come directly from them. So I am asking, what do you want me to do with it?" I thought about it. The money itself was tainted, contaminated by their guilt and too late attempts at redemption. But Celeste was offering me something different. Not their money, but her acknowledgement that I had been wronged, that I deserved compensation for what they had stolen from me. "Start a medical fund," I said slowly, "for families who cannot afford experimental treatments for their children. Make it focused on cases where insurance will not cover the costs, and time is critical. Call it the Sophia Grace Memorial Fund. Use half the inheritance to establish it, and whatever is left after they die. I do not want to be listed as a founder or have my name attached to it in any way. Just create something good out of their guilt money." Celeste was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "That is perfect. I will make it happen. I promise. And Celeste? Make sure they know about it. Make sure they understand that their money is being used to save the children they were too selfish to save themselves. Let that be part of their legacy. You are absolutely terrifying sometimes, you know that? Good. Over the next month, I focused on work with renewed intensity. Kenneth had assigned me to lead a major audit of a new pharmaceutical partner, a company based in Houston that was seeking to join our distribution network. The audit required extensive travel and analysis, exactly the kind of immersive project I needed. During this time, my parents made one more attempt to reach me. They showed up at my office building again, despite my previous instructions to security. This time, however, I agreed to see them, not out of any softening of my position, but because I had something to say, and I wanted to say it to their faces. We met in a conference room on the ground floor, neutral territory with glass walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. My father looked diminished in his wheelchair, his face slack on one side from the strokes. My mother had aged dramatically, her hair completely white now, her hands shaking as she clutched her purse. I sat across from them and waited. They had requested this meeting. They could speak first. My mother started crying immediately. "Layla, please. We know we cannot undo what we did. We know we failed you and Sophia in the worst possible way. But we are your parents. And we love you. And we are begging you to let us back into your life before it is too late." "No," I said simply. My father tried to speak, his words slurred, but understandable. "We were wrong, scared and wrong. Thought we were protecting the family finances. Realize now how monstrous that sounds. Please, daughter, please forgive us." You keep using that word, forgive. Do you even know what you are asking for? Forgiveness is not about making you feel better about what you did. It is not about relieving your guilt or giving you peace before you die. Real forgiveness would require you to fully comprehend the magnitude of your betrayal and accept that the relationship you destroyed cannot be rebuilt. My mother shook her head desperately. "We do comprehend it. We think about it every single day. Sophia's face haunts us. The choice we made haunts us. We are drowning in regret. And yet, given the choice again, I do not believe you would choose differently. Because the same values that led you to refuse $74,000 for your granddaughter are the values that led you to spend $210,000 on a party. You value appearances over substance, social standing over family, and your own comfort over everyone else's survival. Those are not traits that change with age or regret. Those are fundamental character flaws." My father made a sound like a sob. "What can we do? Tell us what we can do to make this right." "Nothing. There is nothing you can do. Sophia is dead. Those years I spent drowning in grief and debt, while you planned parties and maintained your social status, are gone. The relationship we might have had was destroyed the moment you said no to helping your dying granddaughter. These are consequences, and consequences are permanent." My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled back sharply. "Do not touch me." "Then what was the point of this meeting?" she asked, her voice breaking. "If you will not forgive us, if nothing we do matters, why agree to see us at all?" "Because I wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you that I do not forgive you. I wanted you to see that I have built a good life without you, that I have become successful and strong and complete despite your abandonment. I wanted you to understand that your guilt is yours to carry, not mine to relieve. And I wanted you to know that when you die, I will not attend your funerals. I will not mourn you. I will not remember you fondly. You will simply be people I used to know, who taught me a valuable lesson about the difference between biology and family." The words landed like physical blows. My mother crumpled, sobbing into her hands. My father stared at me with an expression of absolute devastation. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even anger anymore. Just a cold, clear certainty that this was justice. I stood to leave, but my father raised his shaking hand. "The photo book. The one you sent before Celeste's wedding. We have looked at it every day since it arrived. Every single day we sit together and look at our granddaughter's face and remember what we did. Good, I said. That is appropriate. Is that what you wanted? My mother asked through her tears. For us to suffer? Are you satisfied now? I did not send that book to make you suffer. I sent it to make you remember. You had made Sophia abstract, a sad event in the past that you could rationalize away. The photos made her real again, made you confront the actual human cost of your choice. That is not revenge. That is accountability. We are dying, Layla, my father said. Both of us, in different ways. Your mother's anxiety has destroyed her health. My strokes will eventually kill me. We have lost everything that mattered. Our daughter, our granddaughter, our self-respect, our peace. Is that not enough punishment? It is not about punishment. It is about natural consequences. You made a choice that revealed who you are. I made a choice to remove you from my life based on that revelation. These are simply the results of our respective decisions. My mother looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. When did you become so cold? You used to be such a warm, loving person. What happened to that girl? She died in a hospital room 7 years ago, begging her parents for help that never came. What you see now is what survived. I left the conference room without looking back. Security escorted my parents from the building, and I returned to my office. My hands were steady as I gathered my materials for the Houston audit. My mind was clear. The meeting had been necessary, a final severing of whatever phantom connection might have remained. That evening, Celeste called. They told me about the meeting. Mom was hysterical. She said you were cruel and heartless. I was honest. I know. That is what terrified them. They expected anger they could respond to, emotion they could work with. Instead, you gave them cold truth, and they have no defense against that. How do you feel about all of this? I asked. Honestly. Celeste sighed. Conflicted. They are still my parents, and I still love them in some damaged way, but I cannot unsee what you showed me. I cannot pretend their choice was reasonable or forgivable, so I am maintaining a relationship, but it is surface level. I see them once a month, talk about safe topics, leave before things get deep. It is the best I can manage. That is fair. You get to choose your own path. I talked to a lawyer about the medical fund. We can establish it as a non-profit within 6 months. I am putting in $500,000 now, from my own savings and wedding gifts. When Mom and Dad die, the rest of the inheritance will go into it as well. We should be able to help at least 12 families a year, maybe more. Tears stung my eyes unexpectedly. Thank you. That means more than I can articulate. Sophia deserved better. This will not bring her back, but maybe it prevents other families from experiencing what you went through. That has to count for something. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony and watched the Austin skyline light up against the darkening sky. The medical fund was not revenge exactly. It was transformation. Taking something poisonous and alchemizing it into something helpful. My parents' guilt money, which they had tried to use to purchase forgiveness, would instead save the children they had been too selfish to save. The Houston audit consumed the next 6 weeks. I traveled back and forth, led a team of 4 accountants, uncovered significant regulatory compliance issues, and ultimately recommended against the partnership. It was high-profile work, and Kenneth made it clear that this success had positioned me for further advancement. By late September, I was promoted again, this time to director level with a substantial salary increase and equity in the company. I was 34 years old and financially stable for the first time since Sophia died. The medical debt was finally paid off. I moved to a better apartment, nothing extravagant, but comfortable and safe. I bought new furniture, simple but well made. I started saving money, building a future that belonged entirely to me. On September 7th, the anniversary of Sophia's death, I took the day off work and drove to the cemetery. 7 years. She had been dead now for longer than she had been alive. The thought was devastating in its own way. I sat by her grave and talked to her, updating her on everything that had happened. The confrontation with my parents, Celeste's transformation, the medical fund being established in her name, my career success. I told her about the life I had built from the ruins of losing her, about how I had survived when I thought survival was impossible. I do not know if this counts as healing, I said to the small granite stone. I do not know if I will ever be truly okay, but I am still here, and I am building something that matters. That has to be enough. The wind rustled the oak leaves, and for just a moment, I felt something like peace. Not happiness, not closure, but a quiet acceptance of reality. Sophia was gone. My parents had failed her and me. Those were facts, unchangeable and permanent. But I had taken those facts and built a life anyway. I had taken their betrayal and transformed it into boundaries, their guilt into accountability, their money into help for other families. That evening, I received an email from Gregory the lawyer. My parents had finalized their will, removing me as a beneficiary as requested. Everything would go to Celeste, with the understanding that half would fund the medical nonprofit. The email included a short note from my father, dictated to Gregory because his hands shook too badly to type. Layla, we respect your decision and will honor your wishes. We failed you in every way that matters. We hope that someday, somehow, the good that comes from Sophia's fund will balance even slightly against the harm we caused. We love you, even though we forfeited the right to say so. We are sorry, even though sorry will never be enough. I read the note twice, then deleted it. Their remorse was real. I believe that now. But remorse without change was just self-pity. They had shown me who they were in my darkest moment, and I had believed them. Nothing that came after could erase that fundamental truth. October brought unexpected news. My father died suddenly of a massive stroke. Celeste called me early one morning, her voice raw from crying. He went in his sleep. Mom found him this morning. The funeral is Friday. I am not going to ask you to come. I know you will not. But I wanted you to know. How is your mother? Destroyed. Barely functional. She keeps asking for you. I cannot help her. You know that. I know. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not from some distant relative or social media. Thank you for that. And Celeste, I am sorry you lost your father. Whatever he was to me, he was still your dad, and you are allowed to grieve him. She cried harder at that. I loved him, Layla. Even knowing what he did, I loved him. Does that make me a terrible person? No. It makes you human. Love is not logical. Grieve him. That is your right. I did not attend the funeral, as expected. Instead, I worked from home that day, focusing on quarterly reports and budget projections. I felt nothing about my father's death, no grief or relief or satisfaction. He was simply someone who had existed and now did not. The finality of death did not change what he had done in life. Celeste sent me a single text after the funeral. Over 400 people came. Everyone talked about what a successful businessman he was, what a devoted family man. No one mentioned Sophia. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Public image versus private reality. My father had lived his entire life in that gap, and apparently his death would be remembered the same way. 2 weeks after the funeral, Celeste called again. Mom had a breakdown. She is in a psychiatric facility, voluntarily admitted. The combination of Dad's death and the guilt over Sophia and you, it was too much. The doctors think she will be there for at least a month, maybe longer. Will she recover? Physically, probably. Mentally? I do not know. She keeps talking about wanting to see you, about needing to apologize one more time. The therapists say it has become an obsession, that she cannot process her grief because she is fixated on your forgiveness. That is not my problem to solve. I know. I told her therapists the same thing. They asked if you would be willing to write her a letter, just to give her some closure. I said I would ask, but that I did not expect you to agree. I thought about it. A letter. Words on paper that might ease an old woman's suffering. It would cost me nothing, really. Just time and the willingness to articulate one final time why reconciliation was impossible. I will write the letter, I said, but I am not writing it for her closure. I am writing it for my own, to make absolutely clear that my decision is final and the reasons are permanent. Can you accept that? Yes, thank you, Layla. I spent 3 days crafting the letter, revising it until every word felt true and necessary. When it was finished, it read, Mother, I am writing this letter not to grant you forgiveness or peace, but to make clear that those things are not mine to give. You made a choice 7 years ago that revealed your true values and priorities. That choice had consequences, one of which was the permanent end of our relationship. I do not hate you. I do not wish suffering upon you. I simply recognize that you are not capable of being the parent I needed, and I have organized my life accordingly. Your guilt is yours to process and live with. I cannot relieve it, and I will not try. The obsession your therapist described is just another way of centering your own feelings over the harm you caused. Even now, facing death and psychiatric crisis, you cannot fully acknowledge that this is not about your need for forgiveness, but about your failure to be there when it mattered most. I have built a good life. I am successful and stable and complete without you. Sophia's memory lives on through the medical fund that will help other families avoid the choice you forced upon us. That is your legacy, not your business success or social standing, but the good that emerged despite your failures. I wish you healing and peace in whatever time you have left. But I wish it from a distance, and I will not be part of your journey toward those things. We are finished, and we have been finished since the day you said no to helping your granddaughter. Accept that. Live with that. And please, for both our sakes, stop trying to undo what cannot be changed. I sent the letter through Celeste, who delivered it to the facility. A week later, Celeste reported that my mother had read it multiple times and finally seemed to accept that reconciliation was impossible. The acceptance brought her a different kind of peace, not the forgiveness she craved, but the clarity of understanding that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. She stopped asking for you, Celeste said, started talking about other things, processing Dad's death and her own health issues. The therapists think the letter helped, even though it said no. Sometimes no is the kindest answer, because it stops the false hope. My mother lived another 14 months. I received updates through Celeste, but maintained my distance. When she finally died in December of the following year, I felt the same absence of emotion I had felt at my father's death. They were people I had known once, who had failed me catastrophically, and whose deaths changed nothing about my present reality. The funerals were well attended. The obituaries praised their community involvement and family devotion. The hypocrisy was complete. But Celeste and I knew the truth, and that had to be enough. The medical fund launched officially in January, 8 years after Sophia's death. The Sophia Grace Memorial Fund focused on helping families afford experimental treatments for critically ill children. Celeste served as executive director, managing the donations and grant applications with fierce dedication. In its first year, the fund helped 11 families, covering treatment costs that ranged from $40,000 to $150,000. 3 of those children went into remission. 2 made full recoveries. The others gained precious additional time with their families. Celeste sent me updates and photos, which I saved in a private folder on my computer. I never attended events or visited the office. My name appeared nowhere in the organization's materials. But I knew, and that was enough. I was 35 years old, director of financial operations for a major pharmaceutical distribution company, living comfortably in Austin. I had acquaintances but few close friends. I dated occasionally, but maintained careful emotional distance. My life was small and controlled and entirely my own. Some people might call that lonely. I called it safe. On what would have been Sophia's 10th birthday, I visited her grave with a small cupcake and a single candle. I lit the candle, made a wish on her behalf, and sat in silence as the sun set over the cemetery. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to carry it, to make space for it without letting it consume me. My parents had taught me a terrible lesson about love and priorities, and the gap between what people say they value and what they actually value. But I had taken that lesson and transformed it into something harder and truer. I had learned to build boundaries, to demand accountability, to refuse reconciliation that was not earned. I had learned that family was not defined by blood, but by action. And that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was walk away from people who hurt you, even if they claimed to love you. The revenge I had taken was not dramatic or public. It was simply the steady refusal to absolve them, to make their guilt easier to bear, to participate in the fiction that their remorse was sufficient. I had held them accountable by refusing to let them back into my life, by transforming their guilt money into help for others, by living well despite their failures. That was revenge enough. Years rolled forward. My parents' estate was fully settled, with over $1 million going into the Sophia Grace Memorial Fund. The fund grew, helping more families each year. Celeste and I maintained a cordial relationship, meeting for coffee every few months, texting occasionally. We were not close, but we were honest with each other, and that counted for something. I continued building my career, earning promotions and respect. I bought a small house eventually, adopted a rescue dog, planted a garden in Sophia's memory. Life moved forward because it had to, because stopping was not an option. My parents had died as they lived, seeking absolution they never earned, wanting credit for remorse without change. The consequences of their choice followed them to their graves and beyond. They lost both daughters in different ways, died isolated from the family they claimed to value, and left behind a legacy defined more by what they refused to do than by what they accomplished. The people at their funerals praised their public personas while remaining ignorant of their private failures. But Celeste and I knew the truth, and we ensured that truth shaped their ultimate legacy through the medical fund bearing Sophia's name. As for me, I learned that revenge does not always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like survival, like building a good life from terrible circumstances, like refusing to carry other people's guilt. Sometimes revenge is simply living well and demanding that the people who hurt you face the consequences of their choices without your help or forgiveness. I would never fully heal from losing Sophia or from my parents' betrayal. But I had learned to build a life anyway, to find meaning in work and small pleasures, and the knowledge that other children were being saved because of what I had lost. That was not happiness, exactly, but it was something close enough to peace that I could live with it. And in the end, living well, despite everything, despite them, despite the grief that never fully faded, was the most complete revenge I could have taken.